Today's lesson is going to be about solving a system of equations by the technique of elimination. Again, a system of equations is two variables, at least two variables, and at least two equations. Notice here, over here, we have 2x plus 3y equals 11 and 2x plus 5y equals 13. Two equations, two variables, they're the same variables. That is a system of equations. So today is going to be a new technique. So we're going to talk about the 4 steps in order to solve a system of equations by elimination. So step 1, you want to look for a variable with opposite coefficients. Now, what does that mean? Okay, opposite means different sign. Coefficient is the number in front of it. Opposite means same number, but a different sign. So if I look at this, I have a 2x and I have a 2x. I have a 3y and I have a 5y. Notice how the 2x and the 2x are the same number, but they're not opposite. That's what we want. We want them to be opposite. Notice it says look for a variable with opposite coefficients. In this case, they're not opposite. So that's where step 2 is going to come into play. Step 2 is make the coefficients opposite. Okay, so we're going to make the coefficients opposite by multiplying the second equation by a -1. Okay. The third step is then to add the equations together. And then the fourth step is to substitute into one of the original equations. Okay. And remember, your answer will always be an ordered pair. An example would be x comma y. Okay. So again, step 1, look for a variable that's the opposite. If they're not opposite, look for variables that have the same coefficient. Then step 2 is make them opposite by multiplying the second equation by -1. Step 3, add the equations together. What happens is when you add the equations together, one of the variables is going to eliminate, hence the word elimination. And then step 4, we're going to substitute back into one of the original equations, just like we did in the process of substitution. So now let's look at a couple of examples. So this first one here, call this example 1. So step 1 says look for a variable that has the coefficients that are opposite. So if I look at this, I have a -x and an x, but remember that's really a -1 and a 1, and I have 4y and 3y. So do I have a variable that has an opposite coefficient? Yes, I do. I have a -x and I have a +x. That's opposite. Opposite means different sign. So then step 2 says make them opposite if they're not opposite, which they're already opposite. So then step 3 says add the two equations together. So what we're going to do is we're going to combine like terms. -x plus a 1x is 0. 4 plus 3 is 7y equals 10 minus 24 is -14. So notice what happens is -x plus x is 0. That's why we want them to be opposite. They're going to eliminate each other. Add the 4y and the 3y and you get 7y. Take the 10 and the -24, put them together and you get -14. Now what you're going to do is you're going to solve this equation. 7y equals -14. How do you solve this? Well, this is 7 times y. So how do you get rid of a multiplication symbol in between them? You divide by 7 on both sides. So you get y equals -2. That's step 3. Step 4 says take this value, plug it back into, or substitute it back into one of the two equations from up above. It doesn't matter which one, pick which one you want. Again, it doesn't matter. I'm going to pick the second one because I don't like having to deal with that negative x right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the second equation. So I'm going to get x plus 3, but instead of y right here, I'm going to replace y with what it's equal to. Hence, substitution equals negative 24. Now I'm going to solve this equation. X, 3 times negative 2 is negative 6, equals negative 24. Add this 6 to the other side, and you get x equals negative 18. So what is my answer? Remember, you always write it as an ordered pair. So the ordered pair is negative 18, comma, negative 2. And this is your solution. And remember, from graphing, what do? What does the solution mean? It's where the two lines intersect. If you were to graph these two lines, they would intersect at the ordered pair negative 18, negative 2. Okay? So now let's look at the second example over here. Well, the second example, we have a 4x and a 5x. Those are not the same. We have a 3y and we have a 3y. Those are the same number, but they're not opposite. So how do we make it opposite? Well, what do is we take step 2 and we multiply the second equation by a negative 1, which means that this negative is going to get distributed to all three numbers, every number in there. So what happens is the original equation does not change, but the bottom equation becomes negative 5x minus 3y equals a positive 2. And so what happens is we distributed the negative. Negative 1 times 5 is negative 5. Negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. Negative 1 times negative 2 is positive 2. That's step 2. Step 3 says to add the two equations together, combine the like terms. For negative 5 is negative 1x. You can put the 1 there if you want. 3 and negative 3 is 0. I don't need to put the 0 there. 2 and 2 is 4. So now I have this equation. Notice elimination. One of the variables eliminated. The reason they eliminated is because these are opposites of each other. 3 minus 3 is 0. They become 0, so they go away. Now I need this negative 1 to move to the other side. It's multiplication, so I divide it to the other side, and I get x equals negative 1. Now what do? I take that value of x and I substitute it back into one of the two original equations. It doesn't matter which equation you pick, just pick one of them. I'm going to choose the top one this time. Again, it doesn't matter, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 4, but instead of x, I'm going to replace x with what it's equal to. Equals means the same, so instead of x, I'm going to replace it with negative 1. Plus 3y equals 2. Now I'm going to solve this equation for y. 4 times negative 1 is negative 4, plus 3y equals 2. Add the 4 to the other side because I want to get y by itself. So I'm going to get 3y equals 2 plus 4 is 6. Divide the 3 to the other side because this is multiplication, so I'm going to divide by 3. And I get y equals 2. So what is the ordered pair? The ordered pair is negative 1, comma, 2. And again, what that means graphically is where these two lines would intersect if you were to graph them on a coordinate plane.